So hello plant lovers. Today we are in my backyard here again, Vero Beach, Florida, zone 10A, and I want to talk to you about crotons. So crotons are a Florida staple, and I kind of want to share a few of my crotons within my backyard in hopes that this might help you guys maybe demystify some of the croton issues. They've got some pros, they've got some cons, but overall I think they're so worth having in a tropical garden. So I thought let me walk you through, and we'll kind of talk about a few different varieties that I have in my space. So over here, this grouping right here is called Nester Crotons. I love their elongated leaf. They have a variation of color, which I think is so fabulous. They've got a little bit of the pinks, a little bit of the red tones, kind of right along through that seam there. They're just an interesting looking croton, and I love the size that they get overall. I like that they're going to be a nice chunky tall croton. Now these, of course, will get a little bit of that legginess. If you can show them, Bryce, that you get about a foot and a half of just the trunk, and then the beauty is all along the top. That is a typical issue with crotons. So when I'm planning to do crotons, especially if I'm planning on doing a big mass group planting of them, I usually will skirt a solid little chunky plant just below. So which is exactly what I did over here in this grouping. Now you guys bear with the little rubies. They're coming out of their season. They're getting ready to be trimmed so they can be lush and full again. But these are gold dust crotons, and you can see they're doing the same thing where you're getting beauty at the top, but you're getting a little bit of that woodiness to the bottom of the trunk. So I really do like to do a nice job of kind of creating a skirt that's going to give me a solid 2-foot buffer planting. So that way you really get the benefit of that beauty at the top. Now crotons, you know, I have seen them where these guys will come through with the mowers and blowers and the trimmers, and they will hack the tops of these off. And although they can take it, they will absolutely take it. It is really, really harsh on this plant, because what it does is as they come through and they clip the tops and the fronts of this off, they'll cause tearing of the leaves, and each one of those edges of the leaves will not only turn brown, but it leaves them susceptible to disease. So if you can get in here, I usually have my trimmers in my back pocket, but if you can get in here and actually trim the edge of the plant. See how I have the stem that I've trimmed to keep it the place that I want? All of these cuts are other cuts that I've made by hand, and look here how you have a couple new stems coming off of those. This is the way that you can trim them and keep them chunky and keep them full and keep them absolutely gorgeous right along the front and the top and the front and sides of this plant. So really, if you wouldn't mind going in and just doing a hand clip, and the way I trim all of my crotons is I kind of do more of a mushroom effect. I kind of flatten them out a little bit at the top and then really take them down on the sides. So you kind of have a little bit of a mound, but I kind of really give them a good level here, and then kind of curve them on the side. So I'll clip that to make that happen. And so when they flush out in all those areas, and usually where you cut one cut, you'll almost always get 2 little stems popping off of that. So they do reward you. So trimming makes them happy. Go ahead and trim them. That goes for these small leaves of those crotons or the bigger leaves of the nesters that we just saw. So, and that also goes to my favorite croton, which we're going to go over here and see. So right over here by my water feature, you guys bear with the mess that's over here. We are installing a little in-ground spa, and it has tore my whole yard apart. So we're having some troubles. I don't know if Bryce, if you can see that sloppy painter that's in there right in that nook. So that sloppy painter, you guys, that plant right there is probably about 5 foot tall, and it has been in that spot for about 5 or 6 years. They grow super slow. That's been almost in the dark. There's very, very little light in that spot. They get some morning light, and you kind of see how they're searching for morning light in those spots that they're in. But what I love is this plant is such a slow grower, but it does give you that impact, that pop of color. And so if I've got a dark spot in the garden, I'll stick a sloppy painter in there, and it will lighten that little area right up. So it's such a perfect plant for that. And I'm going to pop into another area that gets a little bit more sun, so you can kind of see what that looks like, but it's in the same buffer. So hop on over with me there. So here we are. You can kind of see the croton right behind my bottle palm there, and I had a big hole there. It was between my cat palm and my bottle palm, and I wanted something to kind of come up around my bottle palm that's going to give me some color. So that sloppy painter does just that. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It stays chunky, stays full in time, and I mean a little bit more time, like a couple more years, because they do take a long time to kind of get to where you want them. But it's going to kind of pop out this way and this way around this tree and really give me that interesting variegation of color. And then of course we've got some dark plants right on each side of it to really kind of tame that color down. So anytime you have something nice and bright in the garden, and then you can bring something dark and deep in color right next to it, then it's almost like you're forcing that to pop to the eye. So I think those two play so well together. So I cannot wait till the sloppy painter gets there. So I'm going to share this with you guys because I think that you guys should see the good, the bad, the ugly of any garden. So that way you can you can learn from my mistakes. So these are Icetone Crotons, and this was beautiful. They have been here for 5 or 6 years, and they were absolutely stunning. But I'm going to get Bryce to give you a good close-up of what these guys look like now. So we've had pool construction going on, and we knew prior to us getting the pool in that we're going to have to cut down some of our large palm trees, our large coconut palms, in order to get the little pool in place. And in doing so, it took away the shade that these Crotons really appreciate. So now I am going to have to find a home for these old guys and put them in a spot where they really prefer to be, and then put in something that can handle more of this sun, because you see this afternoon sun that's coming that you see kind of hitting me. It's hitting these all afternoon, just about after 2 o'clock, which prior to that this was in full shade. So this is exactly what I mean about proper placement for a plant or a tree, because they were stunning for so many years. You guys might have remembered them from the previous video, that they're just dark burgundy color and they're little black tips, and they just kind of have an interesting look too. I love Icetone Crotons, but these are not happy. They're not attractive, and they're just letting me know that they're not appreciating the change in atmosphere. So we're going to be moving these guys and putting something more sun-loving in this spot. So Icetone Crotons obviously like filtered light. They like to be underneath palm trees, oak trees, anything that's going to give them a protection of canopy. So yeah, that's where they're going to go. Now we have some Crotons over here that are still in the shade because we have some European fan palms that are protecting them, some other trees to the back that are protecting them. Those are Lady Claire, and I love their variegation in leaf. It's a different leaf entirely than what the sloppy painters offer. It's a much bigger leaf. To me, it's very, very tropical, and this is naturally a very dark spot in the garden. So I like the idea that when I'm looking from the deck and I can see back here, I'm seeing this bright pop of whites amongst those leaves, and it's just so charming. It's just so beautiful. So those do a good job right there. But if those were right here, they would not do well. So, they're just in the perfect spot for their environment. So, yeah, so and the same thing with those. You want to fertilize all of your Crotons with 8-2-12. You want to trim them by hand, because I'm telling you, that makes all the difference in the world. And then if you're in a zone where you're going to get some cold temps, anything into the high 30s, I mean 30, 35 to 38, they're going to lose some leaves. If they're in the 32 range, you might have to cover, because they really are a little bit more sensitive than that. I do not have to cover my Crotons at all if we get into the 32 range to 30. Anything in the 20s, absolutely, but anything above 28, 29, I don't cover anything, because everything is in such a heavy cluster together. They almost protect themselves, and that's what I love about a tropical garden, is it's very nestled into this environment, so they're very, very protected in this area. So I love that that part of this buffer back here. So, but yeah, and Mammy Crotons are fantastic. I wish I had some, and I'm getting some dreadlock Crotons that I'm going to put over there in the corner once we're done with this pool construction. But yeah, so I cannot wait to show you guys the new and upcoming garden that we're going to be creating in here. And you know how I always say your garden is never finished. Well, then you add a pool and your garden's really, really not finished. So we are going to create more of a botanical garden in this spot, because now we get planting on both sides, one along the wall and one along this area, creating a nice little walkway path. So we're going to so that'll be up and coming, so I cannot wait to share that with you guys. I have great plans in place for that. So, well, I will see you guys in the very next garden tour or plant of the week, and I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope these helpful tips help you out in your gardening journey, and please comment True Gardener, and I will see you True Gardeners in the very next video. You guys take care. Bye-bye. So, hey gardeners, welcome back. So, just as promised, we are back with another question and answer at the end of this video. And today's question is I get it pretty common, and you guys have been so complimentary of my own backyard and talk about how much you love the buffer plantings and the thick layers, and just kind of how that all comes about. But your main question is, when you're planting your trees, you're starting that privacy buffer, where or how far do you plant your trees apart from one another? Which is such a good question, especially near the beginning phases and you're looking at a blank slate and you're like thinking, okay, how far throughout that bed do I need kind of heavy blockage? And I wanted to do this question on camera because this is it's kind of a hard question to answer. It's a little different for everybody, but I'll do my very best to be kind of general. If you have a backyard buffer and you're like a situation like mine where you have a couple pool screens behind you, that's obviously going to be a hot spot. That's kind of when I'm looking for my clients. I'm looking for is it a roof line we're trying to cover over here on the right, or do your back doors open to this particular area, and we're really trying to focus and get real immediate coverage there of that kind of palm frond look. So a lot of that's where I start. I start with those hot spots. So what you want to start with at your very rear of your property line, if the coverage you're looking for is a roof line or a pool cage or a neighbor's house or whatever that might be, and maybe you've already put your backdrop in like a row of Lucie or a row of Brazilian red cloaks or something that's going to give you kind of that lower kind of canopy coverage, but you're looking for now blocking what's above that, what's behind you, so you don't feel like you're in a fishbowl, kind of like how I felt. You want to start with your vertical trees, your thick canopy palms that are going to be above it. So you can do something like your triangle fan palms, maybe your foxtail palm. If it's a thick layer, you might do multiple foxtail palms, or get a foxtail palm that has 2 or 3 heads to it, so it's a really big dose of coverage right there. So you want those to be your tall vertical. So that's your rear backdrop. That's where you start. And you take that as far back as you can, so that way you can really layer in front of it. And that's kind of what I did there. So my rear backdrop is the Lucie hedge, because I wanted dark. I didn't want to see light through any of it. And palms will allow light. And then I took my taller, more vertical trees, and those became my backdrop. Now, when I started, I just did not have the money to, start huge. Even though I have access to trees, landscaping can get pricey, and I'm with you guys on that. So I started with coconut palms, because coconut palms grow like that. You wake up the next day and they're 20 foot tall. So I started my backdrop with coconut palms. And that was my first rear tier for immediate coverage, because you get those canopies. They'll pretty much give you 15-foot width of coverage of those dense tropical palm fronds, and they're absolutely stunning in that way. And then I started with my next round of trees. And again, I started them fairly small, but I started with my triangle fan palms, because I knew that if I brought my triangle fan palms in at around like 9 to 10 foot, which is about a 25-gallon size, and then I brought my coconut palms, and my coconut palms had grown above that. I've already started a 2-tier effect. And between the distance between my coconut palms in the rear to my triangle palms in the front, I bet I didn't give it 6 feet. Because by the time I brought my triangle palms in, they were kind of what would you call trunk size. So they were kind of the size of my coconut palm trunk. So I was able to kind of layer them right on top of each other. So my trunk of my tree was here. My coconut or my triangle palms kind of came to here. I hope that makes sense. I'll see if I can get Bryce to slide in a visual. But so when your palm fronds are kind of just where your trunk of your tree is, you can pretty much put it right on that tree. Fibrous roots of those palm trees, they're just so aggressive. They're going to be just fine connecting and working with one another. You're going to fertilize them all at the same time anyway, so you can put them rather close. So, and then the next step, fortunately I had to wait budget-wise for the next step, but by the time I was ready for the next step, those triangle palms had become taller, leaving me, again, another tree trunk to work with. So I put in front of those was the bottle palms. Now, I know between the distance in height, that I'm never going to have my trees compete with each other. I mean, not in a level where they're growing into each other. Obviously, I want layer on top of layer. That's that kind of tropical look that I like, or else I could spread them further out if I want distinct distance in the steps. I hope that makes sense. But I don't mind my trees meshing close together, and I didn't have a lot of room to work with. My back buffer is 15 to 16 foot deep, and I know that sounds like a lot, but I really jam-packed a lot of stuff into it. So, but if you have more depth and more room, you could actually start your tiers, from the back and work your way forward and give each tree total room to open up and not compete with one another. But if you're like me and you like that look of frond on top of frond, you can literally put them like a stair step effect. So I have my bottle palms to the front, which are not going to compete with my triangle palms, which are here. And then I've got my taller palm trees in the back, which would be my coconut palms. And then I've dabbled in an areca palm and other palm trees there. So if you've got a slow growing palm tree like a bottle palm, a spindle palm, European fan palm, pindo palm, all of those are much slower growing and they're more of a petite kind of style tree. I mean, will they get big? Absolutely, but they're not going to ever get coconut size big. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you keep that stair step effect in mind. You want to make sure that your lower trees are always going to be lower than your next size tree. And then your next size tree is always going to be lower than your tallest tree. And and if I say I wanted superior height back there and I had room for it, I could put in a royal palm way in the back, knowing that it is going to overshadow those trees and become a huge canopy tree above those layers. So you can absolutely always get plenty of, you can always go back and tap in coverage in certain areas that you need to tap into. So do not be afraid to really pop those trees in, condense in a condensed area if that's what you're looking for. And then you guys start young. If you have the time and you just don't have the budget to work with it, start with some container size. Start with 3 gallon, 7 gallon, 15 gallon, 25 gallon. And as long as you put the right trees in that order, then they're never going to compete with each other, because that 25 gallon coconut palm is going to outreach those intermediate trees, and those intermediate trees are going to outreach those lower trees. So gosh, I hope that video helps, and I'll try to slide in some examples of what we were just talking about, so that way you guys have a good, clear picture of that. And if you need more clarity on that, I will do my best to talk about it again, but I hope that helps. Tropical gardens are meant to really intertwine, just like they do in the rainforest. So don't be afraid to squish them into your garden, and you can live that tropical lifestyle too. So, all right, true gardeners, thank you so much for visiting with me. It's been my pleasure. I've had my cup of coffee with you all this morning, so I look forward to seeing you in the very next video. You guys take care.